Good evening and welcome to the May 20th City Council meeting. If you join me in a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Husky, roll call, please.
Michelle Volk. Here. Luke Hellier.
Here.
John Bermel.
Here.
Dan Walter.
Here.
Joshua Lee.
Great. Moving on to item number 3, citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for those who want to share for up to 3 minutes on any issue. If you're here for an issue that's on the agenda, we typically will have the public weigh in on that specific agenda item. If you have a comment, you can come up. Okay, moving on to item number 4, additional agenda information. Mr. Miller.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Okay. No presentation, so we'll go into the consent agenda. Mr. Miller, anything that you'd like to highlight on the consent agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple items. Item 6C is an agreement with Musco Sports Lighting LLC. This is for lighting at Grand Prairie Park, which we used to call Avonlea Park. Just wanted to let the community know we're continuing to make progress on that park, which is funded through the park referendum. And then item 6E is an agreement with RES Pyro, and that's for the 4th of July fireworks. And we're also thankful to the Lakeville Lions, Lakeville Liquors, and College City Beverage for their partnership on that.
Very good. Council, any item that you'd like to remove for further discussion? Okay, if not, I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion about the consent agenda? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Consent agenda passes. We'll move on to 7A, Superior Sand and Gravel Interim Use Permit. This is an item that we had tabled from 2 weeks ago, and I think we'll just turn it over. If Mr. Swift, if you want to just come up and just talk about briefly the couple of the changes, and then we'll go from there.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here again. Dan Swift, Superior Sand and Gravel. Looking for permission, IUP, to mine the gas berm running through the center of the property. Aggregates existing in the berm. Good for the construction market in the area, construction projects. Planning Commission approved on April 25th. May 6th, it was tabled. Since then, we've introduced some new language into the IUP in order to come to a compromise with the council and public. Under this new proposed language, we would have mining and excavation until 2026 instead of 2029, and 2027 if the material imported into the site meets or exceeds the export material out of the site. So that would hold us accountable to continue restoration while we are in there mining. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Frank if there's not any questions at this time. Or Mr. Dempsey.
Yep, I don't think Frank had anything to add.
Mayor and City Council. As you know, the City Council had tabled action on this for additional information and an opportunity for the applicant to consider an alternate time frame. And also to allow a full complement of City Council members at the meeting. And so, as Mr. Swift had pointed out, they're requesting mining until 2020's end of 2026, with the intent of importing a significant amount of material, at least that matches the, or exceeds the amount of material that is being exported. And the additional time frame until 2027 was included to allow a safety net for the applicant and in the event of economic conditions that they're not able to control. So it is in fact a reduction in the amount of time overall that was originally approved. So stipulation S includes this language in the interim use permit. There's findings of fact, and I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, council, any questions? Comments? Joshua?
With this new language, I'm curious how that is measured, or who keeps track of the material coming in and out of the site, and how we know that it's being replaced one for one.
Correct. Councilman Lee, the applicant is required to apply for an annual mining permit once the interim use permit is approved, and they provide us with the information on their anticipated quantity to export, acreage to be mined, and it's uncertain what the amount of import will be. So at the end of that year, before the next permit is approved, excuse me, they submit the tonnage records. So we rely on their information, the applicant's information. Historically, that has not been an issue that we can see with the mining on this site or other sites in the city. But we do rely on the information that they provide.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Other questions? Yep, John.
No questions, just a quick comment. So we had been down this road before, and I was surprised to see it come back, but I wasn't surprised when I saw that there's actually a resource in there that wasn't accessible before. And now that resource is accessible, so I see the reasonableness of mining that valuable resource. I would like to propose one additional stipulation that may be already something that you do, and that would be that any loads leaving the pit be either wetted or covered for traffic safety purposes and road purposes.
I think we did that last time too, didn't we?
I do know that Mr. Swift had answered that question for me in email. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, the wetting down of the loads wouldn't do. The dust comes from the haul roads, the trucks traveling over the haul roads. The material loaded into the trucks is already, you come into a pile, you take a bucket, a lot of that material's inside that stockpile, so it's already got moisture content to it. As far as the tarping, we do control dust in the pit with a water truck and out of our stormwater pond. As far as the tarps, we can't really control that. It is illegal, or it is illegal to not tarp your load leaving the site, but generally goes unenforced. I guess I had suggested I would be open to a stipulation to a sign at the exit of that property saying all loads leaving the site must be tarped. We can't really control the trucks that come in because we don't own or operate them by and large. So it would be very hard to enforce that or to hold us accountable for that. So I would be open to a stipulation of that signage at the end saying all loads leaving the site must be tarped.
Yeah, I think that's agreeable. Years of law enforcement experience, leaking loads are a real issue for people that are just trying to get on the road. And I understand that you can't control the behavior of the people that are doing the hauling, but I do think that sign would be, that's just one more tool if we end up doing some enforcement that, hey, you were warned and you were told this needs to be the condition. So I think that's a good way to go.
Mr. Dempsey, do we need to put that in as a stipulation, or?
Mr. Mayor, yes, I would recommend that that a motion be made to include that as part of the consideration of the approval of the interim use permit, if that's the direction that council goes.
Okay. Any other comments or questions about the permit process?
I just have a comment.
Yep.
I'd like to thank the applicant for listening and coming up with a solution so we didn't have to come up with it for you. So thank you.
Yeah, Joshua.
Just another comment. I mean, I've been reticent to be in favor of this proposal because of previous concerns that residents have had. Even with additional time to consider this, I haven't received the concerns this time around as I thought I would. In fact, there is more support for keeping the mine accountable for bringing in material so that we can grade it eventually. And so I'll be in favor of this proposal tonight because of that, even though personally I feel like I've been trying to advocate for residents. However, those residents have also been supportive of getting this project graded and done. So thank you for your continued support and collaboration in making this agreeable for all parties. Appreciate that.
With that, I'll take a motion for an amended permit. That would include language that the applicant will add signage related to covering trucks that leave the premises. John?
John, go ahead.
Oh.
I move to approve an interim use permit to Superior Sand and Gravel and adopt the findings of facts, and that interim use permit include language as the petitioner described with signage advising people leaving the pit to have their loads covered.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is that acceptable from a legal standpoint? Okay. Any further discussion about the permit? Okay. Well, I'll just add, thanks again for your willingness to work with the city and coming up with something that I think benefits both, and so I appreciate that. With that, Ms. Orlovsky, will you take a roll call, please?
Volk,
Aye.
Hellier,
Aye.
Bermel,
Aye.
Walter,
Aye.
Lee.
Very good. Thank you both. We'll move on to item number B, Holman interim use permit. And do you want to start with the applicant or Mr. Dempsey, or? I guess we'll start, Ms. Holman, with you if you want to come and talk about your permit.
Hi, thank you for having me. Good evening. My name is Deborah Holman. I'm the applicant of the interim use permit for the beekeeping colony. My plan is to start with one colony. Obviously, I'll just recap of the last meeting a bit, and then adding a second one, which I know is my maximum limit for the size lot that I have. The type of bee is they're a hybrid Italian carniolan bee, which is a Minnesota genetic queen, and are a product of the University of Minnesota. They're bred with a focus on hygienic behavior and gentle temperament. They have a high resistance to most known bee diseases. And then, just to go over my management plan, is planning on using the IPM, which is integrated pest management, including the powdered sugar dusting, the screen bottom board, green drone comb, breaking the queen's brood cycle. And then I will be testing for mites and treating if necessary. Also, we'll be using swarm control methods, creating an artificial swarm and caging the queen. In the event, the behavior of the bees, in the event that the colony becomes too defensive, I would requeen. And also, if I may, address a couple concerns I know the neighbors had. First and foremost, I have no intentions of harming the neighbors or their visitors. And I am not naive about persons allergic to bees. I too have a mother and mother-in-law who become anaphylactic. I noticed there was a question that came up in one of the neighbors' letters saying, why do I already have the bees? I don't know if any of you here have ordered bees before. You have to order them in the winter and able to have them come by spring. So I've been open and honest about that. I have nothing to hide, and I would like to explain myself. I was watching a well-known beekeeper, EAS certified master beekeeper, on YouTube who's been doing beekeeping for 30 years. And I became, excuse me, quite intrigued with beekeeping. And so I went ahead and ordered my bees and then continued on binge watching the majority of his 727 videos and doing his online beekeeping course, basic beekeeping course. So in the meantime, in one of his videos I was watching, and he says, be sure and check your city ordinances. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that was a thing. So I contacted the city, and they sent me the info on the ordinance and that, and I applied for the permit immediately. So yeah, I didn't realize a permit takes this long to get. When I got one for my shed, I applied and I had it in 8 days, and it was only $30. $500 is a bit extreme, I will say, just for a box of bees. So here nor there, that is why I do already have them, is because I ordered them in end of last year, and they shipped them end of April. So I had to install them, otherwise I would have lost the whole package. So yeah, one other thing I would like to ask is if you could shorten that time frame between getting a permit, applying the application of the permit, and actually receiving the permit. It seems a bit absurd. Then the other thing I would like to do is introduce Mr. Larry and his wife Arlene. Answer any questions any hard questions. I do not have anything else to say, I don't think. So
I have a simple question.
Yeah, Michelle.
I appreciate that you're taking the YouTube, but my question to you is, would you be willing to take a course through the U of M or through an agriculture, something in Minnesota where it's a little more hands-on? And then I don't know if they have certification. Maybe you can acknowledge whether they do or not. But council members, I would like to see in the future that we update this ordinance, if that is a possibility, that the applicants actually have certification. I appreciate your honesty about having to have ordered the bees and that you already have them. And I did watch the Planning Commission meeting, and I appreciate your honesty in answering their questions. And one of the things that, unless I misheard, that this has been something that you've just been looking at in the last year. And so your experience is limited to the wanting to, I don't know if you call this a hobby or not, but wanting to, I look at my cross-stitching as a hobby, and I watch a gazillion YouTube videos on that too. So, so my question to you is are you willing to get some sort of official certification showing that you have knowledge of beekeeping?
To be honest, I don't think that's quite necessary. I have the knowledge, I just need to fulfill it and get the experience at the moment.
Can I
Yeah.
I got invited. I just got, I've never met
If
Debbie
you
till
just want
tonight.
your name and address.
So my name is Larry Hill. I live 22674 Ironwood Road, Lakeville's address, but I live in Newmarket Township. I've been a beekeeper for 24 years, and I started out with 2 colonies, and anybody who wants to get in, if Debbie would have called me and said, hey, I want bees, I'd say, hey, take the class at the University of Minnesota, which is now online, it's not in person. There is no certification. So to answer your question, Michelle, there's no certification to say, okay, I'm officially a beekeeper. So I've been doing this for 24 years. Anybody who raises bees, whether or wants to know more about bees, they come out to my house, or I'll say travel with me to take care of my bees. I have roughly 200 colonies, 12 million bees. In my own backyard, between mine and my neighbor's yard, I keep about 1.2 million bees. My neighbors are 30 feet on this side, 60 feet on this side. So in 20-some years, nobody's ever been stung. My wife, Arlene, she gets stung. She goes to the hospital. She carries EpiPens with her. She went to the hospital twice last year, but not for honeybees. It was the yellow jackets and hornets. She's never been stung by a honeybee, even though they're in our yard. Honeybees are a little different because when they sting you, they die, and they don't want to die. So if Debbie goes into her hive or I go to a hive and I'm not careful, they'll want to sting me because I'm attacking their hive. But basically that I'm the one who's in trouble. Nobody else 10 yards away. But, and I tour people scout troops from Lakeville, home schools, and about 7,000 people over the last 20 years have been through my backyard. And we stand as close as we're standing today, and no one's ever been stung doing the tours. They just fly right by you, bump into you, say, excuse me, and fly away. So, but there is no certification to answer your question. But I do encourage everybody to take the class at the extension at the University of Minnesota. I think that's what I did. It's great information, but it's also, they'll tell you right away that it's what they recommend, but not everybody follows it. So,
Do they give you hand-on experience with when you take that class at the U of M?
I actually raised bees for a year before I took the class, which was I did okay. I just made mistakes, so I didn't get the honey production I wanted to. I didn't do anything different on my bees. I was mentored also by other beekeepers, and Debbie's invited to come to my house and learn more, travel with me. I visit my hives. My daughter's right now is going to take over our business from us, and she just finished it. That's why I know it's online only at the University of Minnesota's extension class. And then now she has her own yard of 12 bees. Where one of my yards, she's just going to manage her each week and learn. So, but I train anybody who wants. People help me, so I help everybody else. That's why I'm here tonight. So,
Joshua?
Well, it seems like the biggest concern from neighbors has been about stings. As I've researched on my own about honeybees, I've educated myself a little bit more about their flight patterns and where the risks are, and what you've said seems to be consistent to what I've read kind of across the internet and whatnot, and even at the U of M about the lack of risk, except for when there are inspections or harvesting of honey. That's usually when they're most agitated. And can you talk about how that process takes place and what the risks are to neighbors during that part, particularly in close proximity, because this property is fairly close to other neighbors?
yeah, I drove by the home the other day, and there's 45 feet between the hives, whatever. And and I also read, I'm not sure who put it together, the Planning Commission for the City of Lakeville, for your expectations for bees, and it was written together very well. And I also read if Debbie moves it, if trees go down, then she got to put a fence up, because the bees will take that flight pattern, they'll go up and they'll fly. I don't want to say they're lazy, because they produce about 24,000 pounds of honey for me every year, but they'll stay at this height until they get back to the hive, go over that fence and go down. So the fence was a good part to put in your planning commission. To answer your question, the first one, you just do inspections. That's usually not a problem. And you learn that as a beekeeper. You go on a day like today where it's 80 degrees, sunny, and the bees are just, when I took the University of Minnesota Extension course, girls were in short skirts and T-shirts, just a veil, and working bees. Once you use a smoker, for example, the smoker calms them down. It just basically what it does, it tells the bees, hey, there's a fire coming, and they go in the hive and they suck up all the honey they can because they have to move because the fire's coming. And so it's not really anything else other than they think the fire's coming in nature. So as soon as you do your work as a beekeeper, as soon as you walk away, the smoke dissipates and the bee says, hey, everything's fine, they go back to work. When I harvest honey, my phone's going up, I'm sorry. When I harvest honey, it's not just necessarily harvest honey. From August, mid-August to mid-September, there's no nectar anymore. The main nectar flow in this area is over with. All the lilacs are done, apples are done, there's dandelions are all done. So they'll be flying around looking for something, but again, you'll see more bees at your home. I see more. July 4th, you'd sit at my house, you'd never see a bee. But October 4th, you'll see bees flying around. Bird feeders is probably the number one to get the dust off that. But again, a bee will land on you and fly away. It won't sting you, they don't want to die, if that answers your question. When I harvest it, again, you smoke them first, calm them down. If you do it right, you put a fume board on top. They don't like the smell, it pushes them down, so they know you took the honey away. Take the honey, put it in your vehicle, so you can take it right into her shed. It's right next door. I saw the picture of it. And then put the cover back on, the bees just go back up and like, hey, where'd our honey go? So it's not, I don't get stung The worst time to get stung, I'll tell you this, it won't bother neighbors.
I'm learning.
When you go to work on the hives when it's 40 degrees and rainy. Just like us, they're pissy when it's that kind of weather in the summertime. So that's the worst day. And you know, all I do is bees now. I retired my full-time job 5 years ago, so I don't work bees when it's 45, 50 degrees and rainy. So.
Good, thank you.
Do you have other questions for them? Otherwise, I'll have Mr. Dempsey kind of give a staff report. You guys can sit down. Thank you.
Nursing a bit of a cold, so just in case. So the request this evening is, and I would ask Corey to put the PowerPoint up. The request is for keep 2 beehives at 18005 Jacquard Path. 1135.3 of the zoning ordinance allows beekeeping in residential districts. And this particular property is zoned RS2, single-family residential districts. These lots here are approximately ½ acre in size, rather large. This property to the north is owned by the city of Lakeville. The Dakota Heights Water Tower, approximately 10 acres in size. And so properties of this size are allowed to have up to 2 hives, which Ms. Holman is proposing. This is the first interim use permit that has been requested from an applicant since the city adopted the code in 2017. The Planning Commission had spent a good number of time, work sessions, public hearing, to establish these regulations, and we looked at other cities, city of Egan and city of Edina, both of which had and continue to have regulations for keeping of bees. I did speak with someone with city of Edina. City of Egan didn't respond at the time I made the request. But since 2017, they've had no complaints that related to the bees other than someone had installed the beehive too close to the property line, but no issues with the bees themselves, was the information I received. So the Planning Commission held a public hearing on May 9th. One person did comment, a neighbor who had concerns about bees being near the large quantity of bees being near the property, is that they have visitors that are allergic to bee stings. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of the interim use permit, subject to 6 stipulations, and the Planning Commission minutes are attached. After the public hearing, 2 letters were received from other neighbors in the vicinity. Those are included in the memo to the City Council, and they also raised concerns because they have family members that are allergic to bee stings. I did inspect the property after the Planning Commission meeting and explained to Ms. Holman the process moving forward, and if it was to be the interim use permit was to be approved, that we would come out to inspect the property after both of the hives are settled in, and also 1 year after the interim use permit if it's approved. You can see the property, this outline here is an existing shed that's on the property. The proposed hive is right in this location. The hive's actually there. And the setback to the property line minimum is 20 feet. This is an aerial view. There's a large stand of trees on this part of the property. The homeowners here have installed trees along this line. And so the request would be to have 2 hives in that location. This is the hive and the shed and the stand of trees that are behind it. Of course, there's findings of fact for the City Council to consider with these stipulations recommended by the Planning Commission. So I'll stand for any questions.
Okay. Council, any other questions or comments on the permit? John?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge the emails and the conversations from neighbors. And, you know, I understand and I hear most of the concerns were like Councilmember Lee said, household members that are allergic to bee stings. So I recognize the seriousness of that. The thing with this is we're evaluating this permit application based on the ordinance as it exists now, and I'm just not seeing anything that doesn't comply. A couple thoughts. One thing that I would like to see perhaps is when we do the inspections, engaging somebody with some, bee expertise to assist the city staff if that's possible, just so we know that we're just seeing everything, because I think there's some potential. This has been fascinating, watching everything that's going on and going through this process and doing research. And I think we're just in this mode where we're learning. So I would like to see that if it's possible. And then I agree with Councilmember Volk that it would be good to just review this ordinance. I've heard a couple things just from the petitioner that I think would be good to consider for that. But all in all, in terms of, from my seat, in terms of evaluating this against the ordinance that we have now, I'm seeing compliance.
Other comments or questions? Okay. I will echo what my colleague said. There's nothing in the application other than, you had the bees before you had the permit, but I understand the timing of that. That would preclude me from not supporting this. I do agree with you both that I think we should think about potentially adding in the future coursework or some sort of certification or whatever. So maybe the Planning Commission can look at some options on what would be good when we review that. And then I also feel comfortable with the staff review a year from now to see how things are going. So I'd also encourage neighbors that if there are situations, to make sure to let the city know right away if there are situations with the bees. So, Joshua.
The only other thing I wanted to add is that for Ms. Holman is that, some of the comments you made makes it maybe feel like this is an arduous process for apiary. But at the same time, this is and can be a touchy subject, and I do appreciate you going through the process and informing all your neighbors about this, because now it makes everyone more aware. It makes us aware of what's happening in the city, and I hope this hasn't been a wedge for you and your neighbors. Hopefully it is creating at least opportunities to be more understanding of what's going on and understand what honeybees are. I feel like there are some misconceptions about honeybees, which is valid, because I think most of us think of hornets and things that sting us as being dangerous, and these can be too, but is not the natural nature of honeybees. And so this, I think, has been a positive educational process for everyone involved, even if it has been longer than you wanted it to be. So thank you for that.
I have one more comment.
Yes, Michelle.
So in watching the Planning Commission meeting, it became apparent that there was some concerns by the Planning Commission members, but however, they were limited to approving the permit, interim use permit, based on what our current ordinance was. But I think they also agree that they would really like to take a look at that ordinance a little bit more in depth and make sure that, because I know that the city council had in 2017 removed some of the fencing requirements or something based on the student input, and I appreciate that, that it was students that brought this forward for the council to take a look at. But I also think in the 7 years, 8 years that it's been now, that the Planning Commission kind of agreed that they would really like to take a little bit more in-depth look at it. And I guess for the public that's, sent us the emails, et cetera, in some ways, my hands are almost tied like the Planning Commission members. It falls within the guidelines of the ordinance, but I would like to see us update that ordinance in the future. And there is a reason for this process to take as long as it does. this is something that you're introducing into your community, and whereas, you know, a shed, et cetera, is not something that's gonna, it's not something that's gonna affect the neighbors like bees will affect neighbors, or the perceived notion of what the bees will affect the neighbors. So I personally would not like to see this slowed down. I think that the whole process has been a good one, but it's also been good for us to probably take a look at this more in depth. So because of that, I have to support it, but otherwise I wouldn't. I would want the certification or a class shown that you've attended a class.
Dan?
I just want to thank the applicant and Mr. Hill. I feel like I've learned quite a bit on this as part of this process. And I just want to echo what everybody else has said. I do think it's clear. I appreciate, I think it was Mr. Ostergaard who in his comments mentioned the discussion from the council back in 2017, and that the intent was to review this regularly. Well, if there's no applicants, there's really not anything to review. So thank you for being the test run here, I guess. So again, I want to just echo what everybody else has said about the neighbors who have expressed concerns. Those are very legitimate concerns, and I would just encourage them to stay in touch with the city as this progresses. So,
Mr. Hill, is there one thing you want to add?
Thank you, Dan, for that. The $500 fee you have is absorbent, and that's your call. That's fine. But I can tell you, I've helped 2 other beekeepers in the city of Lakeville, smaller lots than Miss Holman's, and people are saying, beg forgiveness, ask permission later. So maybe consider lowering that so they get their permits and you can actually control it. And I'll give the clerk my contact if you want to get someone to help you with bees. I only live 10 minutes away from here. I can go visit people's hives and let you know how they're doing. So I'll certainly give you mine.
Thank you. Joshua?
I'd like to move to approve the Deborah Holman interim use and adopt the findings of fact.
Okay, is there a second?
second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Bermal,
Aye.
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Volk,
Aye.
Hilliard.
Aye. Okay, congratulations. With that, we'll move on to unfinished and new business. Anything? Okay. With that, announcements. The next meeting is Tuesday, May 28th. Next Monday is Memorial Day, and that's a work session here in the conference room. Next city council meeting is June 3rd, back here at City Hall. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.